everyone. This is Pam Reese with Adventures in Aging, and I'm here with my friend in aging, Gary Vandenberg.
It's great to be back, Pam. Another week here.
Another week and another topic. Before we get into that, I just want to thank all of our listeners for subscribing and for sharing our podcast. I can't thank all of you enough, and Gary and I are very, very appreciative. So, Gary, tell us about our topic today.
Well, we've been getting, good feedback, positive feedback on our programs here. And one that came in was saying that they'd heard our choices one, good choices, bad choices.
Right. A few ago.
Risky choices, those types of things that said, hey, why don't you talk about decisions that people sometimes have to make about an aging relative or someone and the influence sometimes your siblings have and your relationship with your siblings and how that changes when you're making those kind of big life type of decisions. And I said, that's a great feedback, good idea, and let's roll with it. So,
and in fact, Gary, every single one of us will have to make decisions about a loved one in our lifetime.
And sometimes they make decisions, every day. And in preparing for this, I talked with family and friends, and a lot of people are involved in their families, their parents every day, making those calls and saying, how's it going, and setting up appointments and doing all those types of things.
And if we aren't making decisions for others, that means something happened to us, and they're making them for us.
Oh, my gosh. So I think that, where I wanted to start with was years ago, I don't know if you remember a guy named Stephen Covey.
Of course.
And he was
the day planner.
The day planner. But he also wrote a couple of books, and one was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Sure.
And what always stood out to me in that was a discussion about the circle of concern and circle of influence. And how often, we are in situations and people say, people are starving, people are hungry, people are in need and trouble and all of those things. And that's really that circle of concern.
Sure.
We all have that concern about others.
Or we should.
We should.
Right.
But how many people really go that next step of doing something about it? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Of really saying, well, if you feel that way, why don't you drive over to their house and leave some food, or why don't you do something that's going to make their condition better?
I think because people say, I'll do that tomorrow.
Right. And so that's called the circle of influence. That's that inner circle there. And what came to mind, and I read a book several years ago, and it was talking about the phrase, the highway to hell is paved with good intentions. Did you ever hear that phrase?
Oh, my gosh, yes. My whole life.
And I never understood what that meant.
Explain to us.
I'd like to explain it. So, And it's the fact that, again, a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to, good luck with that. I'm going to help you out. Hey, you're starting a new adventure, a new career, whatever it might be. And they offer that, that good intention, but they never do anything more than the intention.
Right.
And I think that's what
life is full of good intentions.
Good intentions. It's a four-way highway, if you know what I mean there.
I do.
And so when I was thinking about this topic, what jumped out to me was just that whole idea that there's big decisions and little decisions. But what's sometimes interesting is we like to make decisions, don't we?
No, all of us like to make decisions mostly for other people.
It's fun, isn't it?
No, in fact, did you know that it's declared to be a fun and liberating experience to make decisions for other people?
No, I didn't know that.
Yes.
It is fun, though, isn't it?
It is.
Sometimes it's easier to make, give an opinion or a suggestion to someone else than dealing with your own world.
Right. And you don't have to deal with the effects of that decision. That other person does.
Yeah, but they have ramifications, don't they?
They do.
And I was thinking about my own kids and their career paths, and one of them actually changed the whole career path because another relative said, you'd be terrible at that. I think he wanted to be a chef or something like that.
Yeah.
And what came back was, oh, you'd be terrible at that. Well, see, and because of the person's influence, they changed the whole career path, right?
No, think of how many people in high school were declared the one least to be successful.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
It turns out they're the CEO of some big company.
I'm in charge of my high school reunions, and they show up. Those guys show up, definitely.
Yeah.
And the ones that were the superstars in high school,
right.
We never hear from them again.
No, you never see them again.
But how important it is but I guess the question is, when it comes to decisions, and if we're talking about our parents or, trying to influence that, is it their point of view, our point of view? See where I'm trying to come from?
I do.
What's important to them?
So just in my experience in healthcare and also in making decisions for my own mom, it's twofold. You start making some daily decisions, very incidental, everyday, casual decisions. For instance, how mom wears her hair, the clothes mom's going to wear, the shoes mom's going to wear to go outside. Which coat is she going to wear? What is she going to have for dinner or lunch? And we all say, mom would want this. Mom would wear this. Mom would want to go here. But when it's all said and done, are we really doing that because that satisfies us? That gives us the good memory.
That's why it's good to talk about that, because I sometimes think, well, what decisions do I make for others or other situations? And sometimes it's because I'm impatient, right?
Okay.
I'm not going to sit there and wait for somebody.
So you make the decision for them so that you don't have to wait for them to think about it.
I think so. In certain situations, it's like, okay. And what came to mind was, this was several years ago. I was working with a nursing facility, and they had an admissions director, and he just wouldn't get out. He needed to get out and introduce himself to different doctors and hospitals. And I said, we're just getting out. And I remember it was in New Jersey, and I wasn't that familiar with New Jersey. And I said, I'll be out in my car. Come on out and let's take off, right? We're going to go to the hospital, I think, or something like that. And we're gunning it down the road. I'm flying down the road going 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. And he says, we are really moving, Gary. We're really, you're making something happen, that's for sure. But then he did a long pause. He says, but you're driving the wrong direction.
Oh my gosh. So what's the bottom line? What's the hidden message in that?
Well, we were moving. That was,
right.
And I think when we were talking about decisions, sometimes, even moving in the wrong direction is fine, just as long as you're moving.
As long as you keep moving.
Yeah. Well, you can refine things. I think sometimes people think some of these decisions are the last time ever, right? And they really aren't. I mean, if you go and buy a dress and it's the wrong dress, is it the end of the world? Right.
It is for the event that you're going to.
Well, for that event,
right?
Right.
Not, it's momentary.
You're right. It's losing a battle or winning a battle, but
correct.
Not always winning or losing the war there. And I think sometimes though people make those decisions, including myself. I'm sure you do too, because we don't have a lot of information. Right. In that situation, right. I should have spent that few extra minutes figuring out what the address was of that place we were going instead of just saying, get in the car and let's go. Right.
And you mentioned the other day about frustration. Just to alleviate frustration in a conversation, you'll make a decision for someone.
Right. Yeah. Just to keep it moving forward. And so then I was thinking about another situation that was tied in with this too, and how, again, it deals with making decisions for a parent.
Yeah.
And I was filling in as an admissions director that had gone on vacation at a facility, a skilled nursing facility. And I was waiting for somebody to come in or call or something like that. And sure enough, a family member came in, and I could overhear them at the front desk before I got up to go, introduce myself. And what the woman was saying was, she says, how much does it cost to stay here? And I go, that's an interesting,
Yeah.
And so I went out and introduced myself, and I kind of knew what was going on here, because when people come in and the first thing they say is, how much does it cost?
Of course.
That means they don't know anything.
Right.
They're basing their decisions on very little information, especially when it comes to assisted living or nursing homes or those types of things. And so I said, well, I'd be more than glad to give you the price, but how about if I give you a walk around, a little quick tour of the campus here and get to know you a little better. And as we're talking, what I find out is she has a couple brothers and sisters, and all of them went out this morning to go find the cheapest place because they're afraid mom's going to run out of money.
Of course. That's a very common problem.
And so once I knew that, I circled back to, in the tour, I said, well, let's stop in at the business office. You have some good questions and concerns. And in the business office, woman did a great job explaining, if your mom ever runs out of, starts running low on funds, we'll help you with the Medicaid program.
Sure.
And she can stay here as long as she would like. And
as long as we get paid.
Yeah. Well, by the Medicaid system, yeah.
Right.
And so what ended up being then, and the best part of that story is later in the day, I'm on a conference call with other campuses that were in the same ownership group. And somebody said, we had a family come in, and I think we're going to have them choose us. I said, what's their name? It's on a conference call.
Sure.
And when they said that, I said, they're moving in here tomorrow.
What?
And what I always liked about that story was our building wasn't the fanciest one.
Yeah.
It wasn't the newest one.
Right.
But it was the fact that we met the need because we gave more information.
That's what is needed. And so a better choice is made.
And so, I think sometimes we deal with that family that's swooping in, though, that out-of-towner. And I think the listener that had given us the feedback said, hey, bring that in, that there's people that are directly involved. She's directly involved with her father-in-law. Talks to him every day, takes care of all of his needs. But there are people that swoop in and out of these situations.
So family dynamics is something that has to be considered, and it affects more people than we would like to think that it did. But when you have siblings making a decision for a mom or a dad, you may have one sibling that lives close to mom and dad that have always been involved in their life, are very aware of their preferences, and you have two other siblings that live out of state that are very rarely around, and then all of a sudden there's a major decision. And then what do you do when that brother or sister come in from California and now they want to make the decisions, or they have conflict with your decisions that you've made for mom or dad?
And, it does happen. I was thinking when you were talking about, I was called on jury duty. Have you ever had jury duty?
I have, yes.
I've been called like 3 or 4 times. They throw me off every time.
They always throw me off because I'm biased.
Including in this story.
Yeah.
And what this case was a daughter. It was they were dealing with a father, and he had passed away. And the one daughter that provided 24-hour care, lived with him, provided everything. It's time to settle the will or whatever it might be. Well, the relative that paid no attention swoops in.
Yep.
Saying, well, I love dad too. I should get more, that type of a thing.
Oh, absolutely. And just in running nursing homes, assisted living, same thing. You see this all the time, every day. You always have that one family member or two that are not on the same page. And so then what happens is you have mom or dad just sitting there laying there waiting for a decision to be made. And so what are your choices? How do you remedy that?
How do I remedy that? I was going to throw that back at you, Pam. That's the fun of doing these podcasts, is saying, I hope she doesn't ask me that question.
Yeah, so Gary, thank you for bringing that up.
Well, obviously, when it comes to the decisions, and when you think about that person swooping in, you have to be careful, because if they get upset, and I've seen that happen, they'll leave. They'll go somewhere else. See what I'm saying?
They will.
And so sometimes you have to take into consideration, and I call it the difference between factual or logical decisions and emotional decisions. And if you ever think about it, the person swooping in, they have their point of view. They have their agenda.
And they have an emotion as well.
And you're just trying to respect that and try to hear them out and hear that, and then kind of walk them through the mental process of how much do they really know about mom? How do they really? And at some point they do kind of loosen up a little bit, saying, well, I just want what's best, something like that. And then the person that actually has been doing the caregiving can move up a little bit in that hierarchy. But I and that's why I wanted to talk about that hierarchy. Wherever you're at in any family situation, there's always I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and there's some type of an informal. I'm the youngest.
Right.
So what influence can I have?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? And I remember I was the executor of my folks' will, and I was like 21 years old.
Wow.
They passed away in their late 50s.
Was there conflict? Was there jealousy that you were?
No. Oh, that I was the chosen
one?
Yeah,
that you were the chosen one.
No, there was no jealousy. They supported that.
Everyone was glad it was you and not them.
Oh, yeah. It was a little bit of a challenge there. It takes time to do those things. But I think the idea is that in any situation, there's people that are going to have a greater hierarchy. They're older than you. They've played a bigger role. They've been closer to a parent, and so you have to also deal with those situations.
You do.
Of trying to work through there. And in our situation, it worked out fine, so that was no problem. But I think what ends up happening is that whole hierarchy, and sometimes these decision making, it's almost like a military maneuver. Does that make sense?
It does.
If you're having, and again, I think back to the days there in assisted living where you bring in an extra chair because the whole family's coming in. We have 5 people in there now. So
how many times have you sat in those meetings and you witnessed a literal fight and debate between the participant siblings?
Oh, yeah. People's arms are folded.
Yes.
People are obviously upset. Some are crying. Some are just don't want to be there.
Yes.
They're pulled into these situations.
And you become the advisor, the counselor, the psychologist, because you're trying to console, but at the same time, you want control over that situation.
Yeah. Well, and this is probably my sales background. I just want a next step. Does that make sense? Maybe the next step is anything.
Anything.
But maybe the next step is here's information and I'll follow up tomorrow with you.
Sure.
But and I think sometimes it goes back to control too. If people feel like they're in control, like I said, stress to me is when I don't feel in control of a situation. So if anytime you can create an environment where they are in control.
I agree.
It always seems to work out better.
So I have some tips to that question that I asked you earlier. So how do you avoid controversy? And how do you avoid the sibling from out of state coming in, swooping? Well, how do we say it? Swooping in and taking over. So it may be uncomfortable. It may not be what everyone wants to do, but during the time of life when mom and dad are cognitively aware and healthy and all the kids are in a good space, maybe they're even not, but someone has to make a decision. It's time to come together. And maybe that's mom or dad. Maybe that's us today, Gary. Maybe that's you and I today.
Right. It's time.
It's time. And you bring everyone together and you declare your wishes for the future. You talk about those wishes. You talk about this is my living will. This is what I want. And pull the plug when I am no longer aware, or when I am semi-comatose, or I have no feelings, or I am asleep. You talk about when is that time for you.
Well, think of those cases over time that end up getting national attention of somebody that they didn't make that known. And maybe they're a younger person,
right,
and that does happen. But then, it ends up being lawsuits. They sue each other. The government gets involved now.
Well, and then there's a big hospital legality with this everywhere with that kind of thing. But I think the more that this family, even if it's 20 years before that cognitive decline or that health crisis, start talking about my wishes and desires with the kids, with the family. Write them down. You can even have it legally documented. Talk about even silly things that you wouldn't think about. Like, for instance, this is so silly, but I told my daughter one day, hey, when I can't move and turn myself in bed, I like to sleep on my left side. Okay. So will you make sure
my wishes are no.
That my wishes are no.
This side up. You put it on your arm.
No, for sure. Now, when that day comes in life, will I still feel like that? I don't know. But it's important to take even your most mundane wishes today. Think of how you live your life. Think of the quality of your life. And how do you view your quality of life when you are cognitively impaired, or you can no longer attend to your own activities of daily living? And put that in writing. Have a discussion with the entire family. And Gary, you might change that 5 times before that day comes.
Right. So, there's things like you said, power of attorney. What are the other ones, like living will, estate planning?
Estate planning, you have responsible persons, you have surrogates, you have legal agents, and some people that don't have family are appointed a guardian by the courts. And that's probably the saddest situation. It does happen. So I would encourage everyone listening to us today to think about getting your desires written down, documented, in place, and discuss it with either your family, have it legally documented. So if you are in an unfortunate situation with a guardian, and that they would know.
And you're never too young or old to do this. How's that
Never.
sound? There was when you get your driver's license, I think they still ask you if you want to be an organ donor, don't they? Mm-hmm. And I had a bad situation. I think I was like 22 years old, and somebody I was working with, he was like 19 years old, 18 years old. And on the way, I think it was to a wedding, he had an aneurysm driving.
Oh, my.
And he didn't die, but he wasn't alive anymore. And because he had that on his driver's license, it took several days to harvest his his body, I guess. It sounds horrible.
Gosh.
But the idea was that, it always stuck with me that I don't think you're ever too young to at least bring it up to somebody. Hey, and he wanted to do that. It's just I think his parents weren't totally aware of what was going to be involved in that whole process.
And I'd encourage everyone, if it's not a mom and dad, bring it up to your wife, your husband, your partner. Talk about your desires. Hey, this is what I want someday in life. Make sure I have. I tell my husband, make sure I have that down comforter on me when I cannot move because but today I like it.
But you'll be on that one side though, right?
But I'll be on that left side with that down comforter, right? You think about your likes and your dislikes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. But I think I have to go back and regroup on what I need to plan ahead because I need to do that a little bit more.
No, see, your head is spinning now, right?
Yeah. And again, as I was saying, what's interesting about decisions and moving into an assisted living center is a big decision. But what I found was, and I've spent most of my career has been in skilled nursing, where people, if they feel like they've made a bad decision, guess what happens? They just go home earlier, don't they?
Anymore they do.
Yeah, but when it comes to assisted living, what I was quite surprised by the last 5 years working in that was people, they up and leave. They go somewhere else. And I stop and think, gosh, I never thought about that. You're making a huge decision, based on information, and now you're up and rooting what's going on. And many times they would give a couple of different reasons for it, but one of them was the idea it's not a right fit. It doesn't fit right.
Right.
And so I thought about that a lot and preparing for the show here, and I was thinking, there's a lot of places for our listeners to think about. If they are thinking about an elderly relative or friend, there's something called a trial stay in assisted living.
Can you do that?
It's like a vacation stay, trial stay. Yeah, respite stay. But most all these places, you can show up anywhere from like just a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, to like a week or up to 90 days, and it's like a hotel room.
So let me ask you this. Would it be possible for a 55-year-old who is still working, loving life, no cognitive impairment, no health issues, say, you know what, honey, you're talking to your husband or your wife, let's go stay at that assisted living this weekend.
Well, some are really fancy. Yeah, some are fancier than resorts, I can assure you that. So, yeah, if you can afford it and you meet certain criteria, I'm sure that would happen. And then the other thing, if like in a nursing home setting, which is a little differently, and people do run into making decisions sometimes quicker on that because the hospital says you got to find some place like right now, is many places, and I've been involved with, we create something called a prehab rehab. And what prehab rehab is coming in and talking to the therapist, it's taking a tour, it's even filling out some paperwork before you have an operation. So if you knew you're going to have a hip replaced and you knew you weren't going to go right home.
Yes, that's true.
Why not plan ahead and go, let's make some decisions early on here?
No, and you're so right. So many people don't even want to think about that alternative living situation today. Right? I don't. Do you?
I think about it, but yeah.
Okay, but you don't want to.
I don't mind looking forward to staying at the nursing home. I told you that in earlier episodes. So that's
You're
my
the
life
only
goal.
person I know.
One of my life goals.
You just want to be alone and have your door closed.
Yeah, I'd rather not have a roommate, but yeah, that's fine.
No, so think about that. Mom, dad, husband, wife. Do you want to go to a nursing home someday when no one can take care of you? Everyone, right? Most people will say no.
Right. That's the emotional decision.
That's the emotional. And quite honestly, you don't want to take mom or dad there.
Well, most people, I'd say 100% of people agree with that.
Okay.
No one looks forward to that.
No one. But the way assisted livings are today, and maybe you could even educate our listeners on some of that, they are some fancy communities. They offer activities and events.
Right. It's a lifestyle. People have to just view it as a continuation of their lifestyle and socialization. And I think that's the biggest thing I can tell our audience is mom or dad are isolated, believe it or not. And we've gone through a tough year in the last year with COVID and everything. But really the idea is being social adds value to your quality of life. It's important. You can't always put a dollar amount on those types of things.
Right.
I was talking with a good friend of mine the other day, and also my wife, who were both kind of like making decisions for their parents these days. My wife makes lots of decisions for her aging mother, and my friend for his parents that are in their 90s. And he was saying, I said, I'm doing this podcast. Do you have any feedback? And he says, oh, and the challenging thing is when my dad calls and he's trying to get up on a ladder, and he's mid 90s and he's trying to climb.
And you're telling him on the phone, slowly step down, right?
I did, and trying to clean gutters, trying to do yard work,
right?
And I think sometimes I said, well, how do you deal with that? I'm just curious, what is your problem solving skills? And he says, well, you just have to be flexible, you have to be available, and he is, which is great. But, both of them, he and also my wife had both said, you have to have a degree of trust. You have to build that trust with the person that you may be making these decisions for. And maybe a small one is the landscaping in the backyard or something like that. But I think that's, an important element I wanted to bring in was just that. And also the idea too is that, these roles change over time, right?
They certainly do.
And I know I was talking to my son, he's in his mid-20s today. I said, when you were little, I was the guy making the calls, and someday you're going to be making the calls about me, right? And how the roles change,
right?
And it's just an interesting thing. I think I also asked him, how old is old, and he said 30. So
that is so funny. I did a little research on that, and how old is old, and it changes from culture to culture, country to country. But at the end of the day, the average old age was about 72.
Okay.
So we got some time before we're old.
And I think the average life expectancy is probably around 80, isn't it?
It is, and women live longer than men.
Right. So, but there is a lot of responsibility that goes into making decisions for older relatives. And like I said, what pops up these days also, and I don't think it's anything new, there's a lot of people that rely on that mom or grandmother's income, the Social Security.
Yes.
And the role that plays in all of this too, and the dynamics involved, saying, mom needs they need 24-hour care, but we need to eat. We need to be alive here.
So many people in life don't prepare for that health crisis when you're older, right? Nursing homes are expensive. That's skilled nursing. And anymore, people don't go to nursing homes to die. They go there to be rehabilitated. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes. Yeah. It's a large percentage people go in for short-term rehab, but there is always going to be a percentage of people that are there for years. That does happen.
They end up there for years. And 60% of the folks in nursing facilities, skilled nursing, have Alzheimer's or dementia. And then you have the assisted livings that we talked about. And people aren't saying, I want to go there, but yet we're also, if that need arises, when do we start thinking about that in life? Who's going to pay for that? So right now you have Medicare, Medicaid, or your private pay. Some insurances, am I correct, will pay for some of it.
Yeah, but see, that's where you get involved with this whole bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is dealing with Medicaid. It's dealing with insurance companies because they're programmed to say no, right?
Right.
I know why they do that, and I have more familiarity, I think, with Medicaid programs and families coming in going, oh, we tried, and they sent us a letter saying you were denied.
Yeah,
and I would say, well, did they tell you why? No, they didn't tell us why.
Sure.
And, and I've seen where you were denied because you missed one piece of something from the bank.
The paperwork is outrageous.
And the family gives up because of one sheet of paper. And the insurance companies, how often, it's kind of a blast to them, but the idea that how, they're sometimes programmed too to say no.
Right.
And you have to go through that whole denial. Well, what is the denial process? What is the appeal process?
Yeah.
What's the next step in this? And work your way through these things.
So again, I'm going to encourage all of our listeners, regardless of your age today, think about down the road, what your future might be down the road. What do you want it to be down the road? Have those tough conversations with your loved ones, with your family, your children, your spouses. Talk about your desires. And then in turn, let them talk to you about theirs.
Right. And there's a ton of resources. We live in a great age with the internet and Google. You can type in things like that. You can type in how do I deal with the Medicaid process? How do I deal with paying for assisted living? What is covered and not covered? What resources are available? And they're very creative people out there. There's these reverse mortgages these days.
Oh, wow, yeah.
There's ways you can sell your life insurance, depending on your age. There's different things you can do to be very creative. The whole, many times in nursing homes, people will say, do the burial, pay for your whole funeral now.
Yeah.
If you need to spend down some
Gary, I was thinking about that. And the older I get, the more I'm starting to think about that. What do I want at a funeral? Right?
What do you want? Yeah,
I want to, is this morbid?
No, I don't know. Depends on
want it to be upbeat. I want music that I like. I want everyone to feel rejoiceful. I want a white casket. I would prefer not to be buried under the ground, but a mausoleum may be out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've made my plans known. You want to know what those are?
Yeah, I do.
And I'm glad we're doing podcasts because then they can listen back to this.
No, exactly, Gary.
I want to be shot across Niagara Falls in a firecracker. I'm going to be one of those guys. Yeah, they're going to take like a rocket or something, some little fireworks thing, and hook me into there somehow.
They're going to cremate you and put your ashes in a rocket.
Yeah, shoot me across Niagara Falls. Yeah, preferably at night. You know what I'm saying?
I am in love with that. So I'm afraid to be burned, but. You're not supposed to think that way.
No.
Right? You're supposed to be spiritually connected and view it the way you want.
I'll be somewhere else watching.
I like that.
Good.
But I think we all have to make those needs known because at the end of the day, no one's living forever.
Right.
And so make your choices today because the worst choices for family are those types of end-of-life choices.
Well, this was a great topic that our listeners shared with us, and hopefully, we shared some insight about the topic, about our own lives, our own perspectives. Like I said, I encourage you to go out on the internet, but have that conversation. Try to set up something with your family now. Use this as an excuse even to say, listen, I listened to something, and they said there's never a good time, so why don't we schedule a good time now?
I love that, and that would be the takeaway for our podcast today. So, Gary, I want to thank everyone for listening to us. Please share, please subscribe, please tune in. And we are loving what we do, and we hope that you are too. Thank you.